Hey there, spiritual maniacs. Thanks for stopping by today. Glad you're here. It is a beautiful sunny day here in central New York, and couldn't be happier. We don't see the sun much this time of year, so anytime the sun's out, that's a good day. Getting ready to record a spiritual almanac for Friday, January 29th. We've got lots of good stuff today. We really do. Starting off with a poem by Stephen Crane. You probably remember him from The Red Badge of Courage, the novel that you read, probably in junior high or middle school. But he also wrote poems. He didn't actually call them poems, he called them something else, and he kind of had a strange approach to them, but it's pretty good stuff. And I think you're going to like the poem for today. It's kind of a witty little piece. So, I'm really anxious to share that with you. I hope you like it. For spiritual nuggets today, we've got a couple of things. The first is something from the 16th century. Pretty famous Scottish mathematician. He's the guy who, discovered logarithms and, popularized the use of decimals. So if you hated decimals in math class, you can blame him. But in any event, he also, saw himself as an amateur theologian, and he had this passion for the book of Revelation. So he applied all of his mathematical powers to the Bible, mashed it all up, came up with a couple of dates for the apocalypse, for the end of the world, right? Pretty much ended the way you would have expected it to, but interesting story. We're also going to be talking about the founding of the Seeing Eye organization. It's the world's oldest guide dog organization. A really great story there. And, there's no overt spiritual hook to it, right? You might, listen to the story and say, well, why is that part of a spiritual almanac? Well, it's a story about someone, who went out of their way to help someone else, right? And someone who's forgotten about. And so there are a lot of our stories that are like that. You might ask yourself, why is this in a spiritual almanac? Well, maybe it deals with an issue of social justice, or maybe it, talks about how somebody, went above and beyond to help someone else. And to me, it just doesn't get more spiritual than that. So that's why that's in here, and I hope you enjoy it. Anyway, let me get set up, and let's kick off the podcast, all right? Welcome to a Spiritual Almanac. It's Friday, January 29th, 2021. The American writer Stephen Crane was the ninth surviving child of Methodist parents. In 1891, he left Syracuse University early to work as a reporter and writer. 4 years later, he published his best-known work, a Civil War novel titled The Red Badge of Courage. The book received widespread acclaim for its realistic portrayal of the Civil War, even though Crane had no actual battlefield experience. In addition to his novels, Crane also wrote poems which he called lines, maybe because he ignored the standards of poetry at the time. He wrote his poems in free verse. They lack rhyme, meter, and even proper titles. When someone asked him why he bothered writing poetry, Crane said he wrote poems to give my ideas of life as a whole, so far as I know it. So it's not surprising that many of his poems focus on the fundamentals of life. They speak about Crane's perceptions of God, the universe, and humankind. For today's inspiration, we're looking at one of his poems that deals with God and the spiritual question of a life well lived. It's a poem titled In Heaven. In heaven, some little blades of grass stood before God. What did you do? Then all save one of the little blades began eagerly to relate the merits of their lives. This one stayed a small way behind, ashamed. Presently God said, "And what did you do?" The little blade answered, "Oh, my Lord, memory is bitter to me, for if I did good deeds, I know not of them." Then God in all his splendor arose from his throne. "Oh, best little blade of grass," he said. More spiritual nuggets for today. On this day in 1594, the Scottish mathematician John Napier dedicated his book A Plain Discovery of the Whole Revelation of St. John to King James VI. It was a work that predicted the exact date for the end of the world. Napier was born into nobility as the 8th Laird of Merchiston in Edinburgh. He's best known for discovering mathematical logarithms and popularizing the use of decimals. But he was also an amateur theologian with strong anti-Catholic leanings and a personal passion for the Book of Revelation. In A Plain Discovery, Napier identified historical events that he believed were paralleled in Revelation, and then applied mathematical analysis to establish the date of the apocalypse. According to Napier's calculations, the seventh trumpet described in Revelation had sounded a half-century earlier in 1541, indicating the end of the world would happen in either 1688 or 1700. Both dates passed without incident. And on this day in 1929, the Seeing Eye organization was formed in Nashville. About a year earlier, a 19-year-old blind man named Morris Frank heard about an article in the Saturday Evening Post. The article was written by a woman named Dorothy Eustace, who was involved in training dogs to perform specific functions for disabled World War I veterans. Morris wrote her to inquire about the possibility of receiving a dog to help him navigate daily life. Even though Eustace didn't train dogs for the blind, she asked Frank if he would be willing to travel to her school in Switzerland to be trained and paired with a dog. Frank replied, "Mrs. Eustace, to get my independence back, I'd go to hell." After 6 weeks of specialized training, Frank and the dog he named Buddy returned to the U.S., and on January 29, 1929, Frank and Eustace established the Seeing Eye organization in Frank's hometown of Nashville. Today, the Seeing Eye is the world's oldest guide dog school and plays an important role in shaping public policy around the use of service animals. In 2011, Dorothy Eustace was inducted in the National Women's Hall of Fame for her work with the blind and her passion for helping others. The world could use more people like her these days, and that's today's Spiritual Almanac. For additional reading, see The Poetry of Stephen Crane. There's a link in the description and at our website. A Spiritual Almanac is a production of Granola Soul. You can find a text version of today's episode, Stephen Crane's poem In Heaven, and other resources at our website, granolasoul.com. Thanks for listening. Be kind, take care of each other, and I'll see you tomorrow.